A world where musicians and artists are silenced. Their voices, lyrics, compositions, even their style, taken over by AI. This is what this album is asking us to imagine. Completely devoid of words and melodies, presents us with the ominous sound of echoing cable interference, punctuated by faded steps and objects crashing in the distance. It was released by over 1,000 artists in protest to the UK government's proposal to offer an exemption to AI companies that would allow them to train on artists' data without a license. The album is titled Is This What We Want?, with every track spelling out the British government must not legalise art theft to benefit AI companies. It is meant to symbolise the existential threat that artists feel AI poses to their livelihoods. However, the UK is not alone in proposing the switch in copyright law. The proposal is taken directly out of the EU's AI Act, while several lawsuits around the same issue are currently being battled in the US. Just listen to this. And this.
The screen door creaks like it used to sound.
AI is revolutionizing the way in which music is being produced, and it's rapidly bridging the gap between ideation and execution. What required years of practice, training, and tons of money now takes days, even hours to make, and can be close to completely free. For example, recently an anonymous user called Ghostwriter released this song.
I came in with my ex like Selena, the flex, bumping Justin Bieber, the fever and left. She know what she need, or she blessed, giving my best.
Despite the sloppy vocals and the glitchy sound, it sounds exactly like Drake and The Weeknd. They could have made this song. Yet they had absolutely no involvement in its composition. Rather, Ghostwriter used AI software that was trained on their voices to produce a whole new track that mimics their vocals with terrifying accuracy. Just imagine waking up to find an AI has created a hit song in your style using your voice, getting millions of streams, whilst you earned nothing. For many artists, this isn't hypothetical anymore. AI is allowing users to create music that can mimic the voice as well as the style of different artists with just a click of a few buttons and a few tactical prompts. While some artists like Drake find AI to pose a serious threat to their livelihoods, others are excited about its potential. DJ David Guetta, for example, used AI to create music in the style and voice of Eminem, and later stated, "I'm sure the future of music is in AI. For sure, there's no doubt." Despite this, most artists are skeptical. The potential to misuse AI software to copy, impersonate, and hijack artists' work is clearly great. For example, in 2023, over 200 artists, including Billie Eilish and Nicki Minaj, released an open letter to tech companies to pledge that they will not develop or deploy AI music generation technology, content, or tools that undermine or replace the human artistry of songwriters and artists, or deny them fair compensation for their work. Okay, based on the vast amount of AI music that keeps popping up, you might think that most of the lawsuits and uproar we are currently seeing would focus on these pieces of AI-generated content. But they do not. Most lawsuits actually focus on the inputs. Let me explain. To understand why this happens, we need to think about old-school video games. Remember how Pac-Man always moved the same way? That's because programmers wrote specific rules. If Pac-Man hits a wall, stop. If he hits a power pellet, ghosts turn blue. Every behavior had to be manually coded. It was like giving a robot a massive instruction manual covering every possible scenario and what to do in that scenario. But AI flipped the script entirely. Instead of handing AI an instruction manual, we essentially show it thousands of examples and say, figure it out yourself. Imagine teaching a child to recognize dogs, not by saying dogs have 4 legs and fur, but by showing them 10,000 photos of different dogs until they naturally understand what makes a dog a dog. This is machine learning, and it's why AI can now write songs that sound like your favorite artist, or even create music in styles that no human has ever produced before. But there's a catch, and the catch is that in order to do that, it needs to be trained on something. AI is not a god, so to say, despite many tech bros' attempts to present it as such. It cannot create ex nihilo, out of nothing, which means that its incredible capabilities must come on the back of the thousands of years of human creativity that came before it. And a lot of artists are really unhappy about it, considering that the AI is using their work to produce outputs which, even if completely original, directly compete with their work. But wait a second. Don't humans do the exact same thing? Adele has talked about Etta James being a huge inspiration for her as a musician, and Lady Gaga has credited several artists as influencing her outputs. For example, in an interview, she said, "I was thinking about Madonna. She was a big inspiration, and I was thinking about Prince. And Whitney Houston is in there too, especially on Mary the 9th. Generally, we accept that artists will take inspiration and to some extent imitate the style, lyrics, and composition of other artists. Pablo Picasso famously said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Of course, Picasso did not actually mean to steal, but it is very true that every artist has to some extent been influenced or built on the work of their predecessors. Something that instinctively makes us frown at the thought of artificial intelligence copying our work is that it is artificial. A machine that is able to analyze information and produce outputs on a scale a single artist or even a whole team behind that artist could never match. This very fact creates a moral conundrum when thinking about AI. From a legal perspective, this dilemma is expressed in whether it's actually fair to allow AI developers to copy artists' work to use them as training material for their AI. To understand this question, we first need to understand copyright and the fair use doctrine. Copyright essentially refers to the right to own something. This could be music, a play, a piece of art, or even a map. The concept of copyright is old, very old. As far back as 2.5 millennia, chefs in the ancient Greek city of Sybaris enjoyed a year-long monopoly over their recipes before anyone could copy and distribute them without their consent. Although this practice was not thought of as granting copyright at the time, it comprises one of its earliest examples. The first piece of modern copyright legislation can be found in the Statute of Anne, which was enacted in Britain in 1710. It stated that the author of any book or books already printed shall have the sole liberty of printing and reprinting such book and books for their term of 14 years. This was the first time authors got explicit ownership over their books. The statute only protected books, but gradually all kinds of works came to be included in enacted legislation to account for future creative endeavors. In our time, copyright has to some extent been standardized through international cooperation. Diplomatic engagements, such as the World Intellectual Property Organization, established the concept of fair use in the digital environment. When they convened in December 1996 in Geneva, however, the signatories were almost certainly not thinking about AI. So what is fair use, and why does it matter when we think of AI? To understand fair use, we need to take a walk in the park. Let's imagine about Regent's or St. James's in London. The whole park can be thought of as humanity's collective creative endeavors. The park is made up of trees and plots of flowers. These are the creations of individual artists. But throughout the park, there are also public footpaths and communal areas where you can stop to smell and touch the flowers without asking for the owner's permission. This is because there is a shared understanding that it is in the public interest to allow engagement with each other's creative endeavors. This is, in other words, fair use. It is the ability to make use of copyrighted material in specific cases without needing the permission of the copyright holder. The idea of fair use or fair dealing, as it is called in the UK, was developed to prevent copyright law from being too rigidly applied. It is also recognition that to be able to use copyrighted material with a license often has an economic significance. For example, the CEO of the Computer and Communications Industry Association, Ed Black, acknowledged, as far back as 2007, that much of the unprecedented economic growth of the past 10 years can actually be credited to the doctrine of fair use, as the internet itself depends on the ability to use content in a limited and unlicensed manner. What constitutes fair use is becoming the defining question around AI. This is because the ability to use copyrighted material for training is quite literally existential. Without training material, AI could not exist. For specific use to be termed as fair under US law, which bears the doctrine's most generous application, 4 elements have to be considered. The purpose of the use, specifically whether it is transformative, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount taken from the original, and the effect of the use upon the original's potential market. Depending on your viewpoint, AI might or might not breach these 4 conditions. And as with everything in law, you have to look at the lawsuits. In 2015, a notorious case was fought between the Authors Guild and Google. Google had partnered with libraries and universities to digitize copyrighted books, allowing users to search for terms within the books and displaying limited snippets of text from each book. The Authors Guild, however, argued that these violated copyright laws, while Google maintained that its actions were transformative and beneficial for public knowledge. In 2013, the district court ruled in favor of Google, stating that the project constituted fair use because it was transformative and did not replace the original works and provided significant public benefits. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld this decision in 2015, emphasizing that Google's actions added value to the public without undermining the market for the original works. This verdict seemed to be casting the floodgates open for AI training. But then Goldsmith v. Warhol happened. The controversy started with a photograph of Prince taken in 1981 by Lynn Goldsmith. Fast forward to 1984, and Andy Warhol, who has made a career out of remixing photographs of celebrities, was commissioned by Vanity Fair to use Goldsmith's photograph as a reference for a silkscreen image. But Warhol did not stop there. He not only created the commissioned piece, but went on to produce 15 additional works based on that same photo. Years later, after Prince's death in 2016, the Andy Warhol Foundation licensed one of these works, The Orange Prince, for use in the magazine cover. But here's the catch. Goldsmith didn't know about this and didn't get any credit or compensation. That's when the legal fireworks began. Goldsmith sued, claiming this was a violation of her copyright, whilst the Warhol Foundation argued that Warhol's work was transformative and therefore protected under fair use. In 2023, the US Supreme Court ruled in favor of Goldsmith. Importantly, they decided that Warhol's commercial licensing of the artwork wasn't transformative enough to qualify as fair use, unlike Google's, which served an educational purpose. The court emphasized that Warhol's piece didn't alter the fundamental purpose of the original photograph, which was a key factor in their decision. To hold otherwise would potentially authorize a range of commercial copying of photographs to be used for purposes that are substantially the same as those of the originals, wrote Justice Sonia Sotomayor in the majority opinion. So, what's the takeaway here? Probably that the battle for AI is going to be very tough. Whether use of copyrighted material for AI training constitutes fair use is going to be decided on a delicate balance of individual versus collective benefit. AI produces original outputs, and as such, its use of copyrighted material is likely to be deemed transformative, but its outputs often directly compete with artists' markets. Despite this, AI is seen as having incredible potential to supercharge the sluggish economies of the Western world. Just this year, the AI Opportunities Action Plan was presented by the UK government, aiming to generate over £47 billion in the next decade by using AI. At the same time, an AI race between the US and China has seen both pour billions into developing AI capabilities. Remember Ed Black's comment about fair use powering the digital economy? AI is just the latest iteration of this brave new world, and given its perceived value for governments and economies across the world, it is likely that the interests of creators will be superseded by wider political agendas. What do you think? Should we care if AI creates music or any other work of art? Is there a moral imperative to stop AI companies from developing this capability? And does this imperative ultimately supersede the wider economic benefits AI could bring to our lives? Let's discuss in the comment. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and if you found this video useful, please like and subscribe.